Okay, in our last lecture, we looked at some the history of money. Today, we need to look at money and how we use it today and how we measure it. The first thing we need to figure out is how much money is in circulation. And as you can see from the screen, there are several different ways of measuring the money supply. The simplest is M0, which is all the cash, all the little green pieces of paper, and all the coins that are in circulation. Now, that's not the only type of money we have. We have checks. Now, many of you may not have written a check, but back in the dark ages when I was younger, we wrote checks. Stores would take checks. Now, it was somewhat cumbersome. They'd have to get the manager over. The manager would have to read our driver's license and write our driver's license number on the back, and all sorts of things. But checks could be used for money. So we had to add something. We knew that we had cash, but then we had to add something because there were other assets that we could use that had some liquidity. For those of you who took accounting, do you remember what liquidity is? Liquidity is simply how easily you can turn an asset into cash. Now, my check was somewhat liquid. Oh, I had to jump through a couple of hoops to get the store to accept it, but in the end, they accepted it. So when I looked at money, I had to also not only look at cash, all right, which is M0, but other deposits like demand deposits. Demand deposits are my checking account. Okay, accounts that are payable on demand. Well, then there were traveler's checks, there were other checkable deposits. So as liquidity changed, as society was willing to accept more and more things as money, we had to include them in our definition. So we went from M0 to M1. Now, when I was an undergraduate, I got my first debit card, my first checking account, and that was great because I could use that to get money. But the problem was I could only get money out of my checking account. The first debit cards wouldn't let you access your savings account because we had passbook savings accounts. You had a little book you had to take to the bank. It wasn't very liquid. But as ATMs expanded, banks realized, oh, we could have what we called statement savings accounts, in which the bank sent us a statement monthly or quarterly, depending on how much action was in your account. And they could then tie your savings account to your ATM card. So as savings accounts became more liquid, we had to add them in. And at the same time, there were other things called money market funds and mutual funds and time deposits. Oh, there's a typo. That should be time. Time deposits under $100,000. So as assets became more liquid, we had to have newer and newer definitions of money. Now, don't let this slide freak you out, all right? For those of you who took accounting, you recognize what's here. They're T-tables. And T-tables are used to help in accounting to organize accounts. Now, if you look at the T-table for Bank A, we'll notice on the left side we have something called assets. An asset is something that you own, excuse me, or are owed to you. So in the case of a bank, they have two assets. They have their reserve account and they have their loans. On the right-hand side, they have liabilities, and these are things that you owe. So in the case of the bank, it's their demand deposits. It's what have people deposited in their account. Okay. So let's take a moment to just kind of look at this. In the United States, we have what we call a fractional reserve banking system. We'll come back to that in our next lecture. But the fractional reserve banking system means that a bank is required to hold a certain percentage of its deposits on reserve. They have to hold them in their vaults, in another bank, whatever. And so that's what we mean by the reserve account here. Now, the banks in this case have $200. If the government or the Federal Reserve requires them to hold 10% of their demand deposits on reserve, then their required reserves are the amount they must hold. So if we break down this reserve account into two components, the required reserves, we see that 10% of demand deposits would be $100. So the bank is required to hold $100. It's holding, for some reason, $200. That means its excess reserves are $100. Now, it's this $100 that the bank can lend out. So let's say Ahmed comes in and he wants to borrow $100. He has a deposit, he has a bank account in Bank A. So Bank A says, sure, fill out this paperwork, we'll give you the money. And the way we see Ahmed getting the $100 is that it goes into his checking account. So do you see that addition here? Now, when the bank puts the money in the account, Ahmed writes a check to Sally because he owes Sally money. So, for the time being, before he even gives Sally the check, what we see happening here, again, we're sticking in this red section, is that reserves stay the same because money hasn't moved, but now loans have gone up to $900. For those of you who took accounting, you remember that what happens on the left side of your T-table has to happen in some way on the right side of the T-table because your balances have to balance. Okay. Now, Ahmed takes his check that he's written to Sally, gives Sally the check, and she takes the money to her bank. And now we're going to look at Bank B, right? We see that Sally has deposited her money into her account because demand deposits have increased by $100. Bank B takes Ahmed's check to the Federal Reserve and says, hey, we've paid this check to our depositor. We want our money. And so the Fed says, sure, we'll put $100 into your reserve account because you have that with us, and we'll collect your money. So if we go back over here to this greenish color here at Bank A, what we see happen is the Fed takes the money out of the reserve account of Bank A and says, we've paid your depositor's check. We've taken our money out of your account, and the Fed's happy, Bank B's happy. But now Bank A needs to take the money out of Ahmed's account, and his demand deposits go down to $1,000. Bank A can no longer lend any money out because the amount they have in their reserve account equals 10% or their required reserves. Now, we're going to do one more round of this just to make sure you've got it clear. Go bank to bank, go back to Bank B. Susie comes in to Bank B and says, I need to borrow some money. And so the banker in Bank B says, oh, let me figure out how much I can lend out. I have reserves of $200, right? But I have to hold oops, this should be $110. This is a typo. $110. Let's put this over here. Okay? So excess reserves are $90. Right. So Bank B can lend Susie $90. So she writes out all the paperwork. She does what she needs to do. She gets the $90. The reserve account stays the same, but now loans go up by $90. All right. Susie needs to pay Tulsi $90. So she writes Tulsi a check. Tulsi takes the check, deposits it in his account in Bank C. We see that increase over here. Bank C takes Susie's check to the Fed, says, please collect the money for us. The Fed puts the money in the reserve account. It takes the check back to Bank B, takes the money out of the reserve account. See, this is decreased by $90. And then the bank takes the money out of Susie's account. Right? Now, all we've shown here is how money moves from one bank to another. Now, note that we started out with how much money? $1,000, $2,000, $3,000. But how much did we end up with? Well, 1,000 plus 1,100, so that's 2,100, plus 1,090. So we ended up with $3,190 in the banks. We have not printed any more money. We have done nothing but lend money from one bank to another. From one customer, gets deposited into another bank and everything. This is how the banking system creates money. But that $190 is not all that can be created because there's still excess reserves in Bank C. So if we wanted to figure out how much money could be created, we use the money multiplier equation. This is very much like the multiplier we talked about before. In this case, we calculate the amount of money that is created by taking the initial excess reserves, that's the amount of money that starts the whole process, times the money multiplier, which is 1 divided by the required reserve ratio. Remember, the required reserve ratio is the percentage of deposits banks must hold. So using that example we just had, there is the initial excess reserves was $100. The required reserve ratio is 10% or 0.1. 1 divided by 0.1 is 10. 10 times 100 is 1,000. So if we let that process of lending and relending to continue, we could have created a total of $1,000. Now keep in mind there's a limit on how many times the money can circulate. That's because every time money is deposited into the bank has to hold a piece of it back. Think about passing a pizza around a room and everybody taking a bite out of it. Eventually, there's no pizza left. Just the same way with money. The more money circulates, the more it goes into a bank. The bank takes a little bit out. So there's a limit on how much money can be created in this fashion. Next week, we're going to look at monetary policy.